Hello and welcome to our BESEA.cc podcast. What is
Yay!
BESEA.cc? Yes, it's short for British East and Southeast Asian Christian Collective. So British East and Southeast Asian normally is termed BC, and it's our Christian collective. So it's a grassroots movement that seeks to serve and represent BC communities, Christians, and churches. So I'm your host, Wayne Fong. I am a disciple of Jesus. I'm a Hong Konger, a British Chinese, a husband, a pastor, and what I call myself a wounded leader. So this BC Christian Collective, we recently started under this banner a what we call a 101 ethnic identity growth group. It seems like we like to have names that are really long, so
Yes.
but we call it a growth group as a pilot group to really explore identity issues and really born out of a desire to think about anti-racism and all kinds of issues that we as BC group have not been able to think about, maybe hidden and silent on, and we're reflecting on it. So really, as a growth group, as a space to nurture courageous conversations, a space for support and healing, encourage leadership, and empower mission. We've got grand ideas, and we start small as a pilot. Because in this growth group really believe that we need to start with ourselves because we want to address injustices and tackle stigma, all sorts of issues in the community. We have to start with ourselves and allow God to reform and transform us. So this podcast here is all about not keeping silent with what we have been learning in this growth group, what we've been experiencing, and give people a chance to share and voice out their growth journey, to capture a bit of what we've been learning. So this is our first ever episode under this BC kind of growth group, and we have Jessie Tang. So Jessie is an amazing person. She has an amazing podcast called Across Culture. It explores culture and identity and Christian faith across UK and beyond. There's a really grand idea here. It's amazing. So Jessie, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Hello. Hi, Wayne, and hi, everyone. Yeah, it's a privilege to be on your first ever pilot episode of BC.cc. I actually didn't know how to pronounce BESEA, so it's good to know it's BC. I didn't know if it was BESEA or something. So, British East Southeast Asian Christian Collective. Yeah, so my name's Jessie Tang. I'm a BBC, British born Chinese, and grown up in the UK. One of my parents is from Hong Kong, the other one is from Malaysia. As Wayne said, I have a podcast. It's called Across Culture, and I'm really interested in the intersections of faith, culture, ethnicity, and the church as well. So that's something that I explore in my podcast when I interview guests, and also the things I like to do when it comes to reading and research as well. I'm also a musician, and I trained in ethnomusicology, the study of music, people, and cultures. And I lead intercultural worship with different sounds, styles, languages in churches. And I'm also part of planting a new intercultural church in northwest London.
Wow. And you have spare time to do other things too, don't you?
I do my best.
So it's fascinating. So it seems like you are very much ingrained and soaked in thinking about people and culture, talking to other people as well. But this growth group is all about our own reflection and vulnerability and authenticity as well. So I really want to ask you, what is your experience as a BC Christian?
Yes, as a British East Southeast Asian
Yeah.
Christian. Yeah, so when I started going to church, I started going to Chinese church, and I was quite aware that there are a network of Chinese churches across the UK. So I would say that Chinese Christians are connected in some way. And I was also part of that, going to conferences once a year, youth camps, and that kind of thing. But I don't think there's much sustainability or actually continuity in between these conferences and youth camps as well. So I would say we're connected, but then there are parts that you can't walk alongside people and you can't journey with them in the way that you might be able to um, in other kind of networks. So that's what I think. I think in the wider church, so outside of the Chinese diaspora, in the wider church, there aren't that many voices that are from Chinese Christians or BC Christians in general. And so that is also something that I'm keen to bring more of into the UK church space.
Wow, that's really good insight. And I mean, why do you think there's so little ability to have voices there then?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, it could be just the culture of East and Southeast Asians in general, and there's less of us, and we might not be. I think even in terms of job wise, people who are East Southeast Asian are less likely to work for the church, for example, or less likely to be missionaries. Obviously, there are some, but this whole idea of looking after parents in their old age and studying hard to do a respectable job. I think, yeah, a lot of us have heard those things growing up, and
Mm,
so oh, you can't be a missionary overseas because how are you going to support the family or how are you going to support yourself? So I think there's these kind of themes going in the immigrant mentality. Parents
mm.
move here and they suffer so you don't have to suffer, that kind of thing. And so I think in general in the Christian spaces there aren't that many BCs, but even if they are, maybe we're used to not being able to speak out, or we're not used to standing up and even being raised up to be leaders in these settings as well.
Wow, that is fascinating. And I'm sure in our growth group and really as we go along the podcast explore, I mean to be and in a way the issue here could a lot of times be even though we are BC Christians, we
Mm.
still have this maybe people call it Confucius cultural heritage or worldview, values, or even a burden that really frames how we think and function, isn't it? So that could be a lot of reasons why the things that you have said, why people feel so difficult to voice things out. Why do you need to feel like they need to respect and honor the parents and do or not do certain jobs, isn't it?
And I'd also say about the dominant white culture
Hmm.
in the UK. So I can't speak for all East Asians and Southeast Asians, but from the Chinese perspective, even with immigration coming to the UK, especially those whose parents are from Hong Kong, who might have come in the 70s and 80s, it's the people who came like was quite dispersed because of the catering industry. And so actually there's not strong geographical places or center of activity so much, apart from London maybe. And then so when you're in the dominant white culture, then the Chinese people, or
Hmm.
at least me and my experience is about assimilating into that as well. So yeah, I think we're just used to the way culture is done,
Wow.
if you can say
So,
that, or the way that church is done.
hmm. So in a way, what we're saying here is there is something about culture that we can celebrate, but also affect us internally in our own culture. But when we're in the Western context, it's also an impact on how we might relate to society and how the society and really in the Christian sense, how they might relate and see us as well. So my next question is, what do you think a group like BC Christian Collective can really play in these kind of conversations?
That's great. Great question. I think with the kind of lack of collective identity, with all the being dispersed and the lack of continuity between conferences and things. So, with the lack of collective identity, actually, this kind of group can build that identity. And I know that there are other kind of groups which are in the US, for example, Asian American Christian groups and things, and they can have a collective voice when it comes to personal issues as well. So it's something that we can explore all together, exploring actually what is a BC response to some issues, current issues, for example. Because I think people talk about or people want to discover their ethnic heritage, but they may not do it through the lens of being Christians. So this brings both of these things together. And yeah,
Wow.
and it's just a good safe space as well for people to grow and to explore with one another.
Mm. So I'm a person that thinks about the future a lot. I like big ideas. I'm a kind of a
Mm.
protector kind of type and challenger. I like future thinking, but also very
Ah,
cynical as well. So when I
oh.
started this group with some of you guys, and some people said, "Oh, it's really great that we can have a space outside of our church to talk about these issues." And when I heard it, I thought I couldn't believe it. I thought people were humoring me. But
Oh.
repeatedly, people kept saying, I thought I need to believe this. But I want to ask you, what has drawn you to be part of this ethnic identity growth group?
Yeah. So as I said before, I'm always interested in these topics, ethnic, race, identity, especially when it comes to being a Christian. And I started getting interested in this maybe 5 years ago or something. And I went on to discover more when I was studying ethnomusicology, studying about music and identity and worship in churches. But also because I'm in spaces which we talk about intercultural stuff. So not multicultural, but intercultural. And it's about different kind of people groups actually interacting with one another, learning from one another, sharing with one another as well. So I'm part of these spaces, but I also want to know I am, who I am ethnically, and grow in that aspect as well. So I think it's important actually to have both worlds, if that makes sense, of discovering who I am with people who are similar to me in terms of ethnic and race, and then also being in those spaces where actually you're talking
Mm.
about different cultures coming together.
Let me ask you this question now, because you challenged, you stimulated something in my mind. So, why is it so important to know who you are in yourself? Because if we talk about we need to be a diverse society, even as a Christian perspective, we need to be as how it reflected in how the biblical picture of what kind of like when Jesus returns and how society should be, and there's a multi-ethnic and diverse society. Why can't we just be that? Why is it? Why do you need to think about yourself and know who you are? Why is it so important to know that in order to know other people?
Mm. Not only in order to know other people, but also to know God better and know
Mm.
yourself and how you're best placed in God's kingdom. Actually, there's one thing that I realized over the course of time is that I see God's beauty when I see God's people flourishing in their gifting. And actually, if you know who God created you to be, if you can embrace that, then you can really live in the fullness of that. You can really flourish in your gifting and be able to bless other people, to be able to learn more of God because you're a reflection of who God is, and to know who you are. Yeah, so just how to be best placed in God's kingdom. And when it comes to diversity, it is about actually when you have different kinds of people working together, then this is where innovation and creativity can also happen. So all of that, yeah.
Mm. It is right, it is true. I think it is so important to know your contribution because I mean, the biblical picture of diversity is like a body. So you can't just be a body and be a like, whole body. Yeah, you just can't simply like the idea of the body. You got to know your own contribution, your part, and where you fit in. And so often, I think, especially as um, East and Southeast Asian, because of upbringing or culture or whatever it might be, especially as East and Southeast Asian in a dominant culture in the West,
Yep.
we sometimes might not even know how we navigate our own self. We assimilate it to other things, we conform to our own culture. But then when you have be told or forced to be diverse, you're not sure what you are, and you can adopt something different, something else is not even yourself. So you need to know, grow, and who you know, be confident with your own voice and your own identity, and then you can really know where you're going to fit in. Yeah, and something so valuable to
Mm,
for us to really grow and understand.
mm. Yeah, you're right. I was actually just thinking when you first thought of the idea of this group, it started off as something to talk about racial injustice, I think, or to explore topics of race and racism. And that's something that actually really drew me to this group.
Yeah.
Because I think BCs have different kinds of experiences when it comes to race, racial injustice, and racism. And we're not necessarily on the same page. And I think I found it difficult to talk about some of the racist things that happened to me, even with other Chinese Christians, because I feel, oh, maybe they don't experience it in the same way as me. And so, yeah, anyway, that was another one of the reasons why I was interested in this group.
And I'm so glad that you are in a group and you have this experience. I mean, I'm not glad that you had negative experiences in racism,
Yeah.
but that you can bring that and a safe space and to process it
Mm,
and and to work it through and being able to voice it out, isn't it? So I really believe the more I understand and more I grow, understand that we really want to change things and transform things as God has called us to do, whether it's mental health or other issue or injustice, racism, is
yeah.
more than just action, doing things. Because you can throw yourself in a wheel and then do it, but then you'll be affected by all the things easily, emotionally, psychologically, traumatically. It means all that kind of stuff come onto you. And if we are not able to understand, validate our own thing going on in ourselves and where those things come from, we're really serving and fighting out of a place of problems and wounds and things we will not understand. So those things need redemption, healing, yeah, and
Yeah.
finding courage to able to verbalize it without being triggered to go bonkers and crazy, yeah, and serve and live out of anger, yeah, or hurt, yeah, and change that in a good place. So I really hope
Mm,
people like yourself and myself in a group like this, we can able to voice and articulate all the good and bad stuff, yeah, and find a way to hold it, and then they're able to find a way to live and change.
so good. I'm really excited to be on this journey. Yeah. It's
Well,
been
I
a long
know.
time coming, it feels like.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad this could be a good journey. I've got another question to ask you. So we started the first session last week, and we talked about the what we call genograms. Or genogram is more than a family tree. It's really looking at generational kind of dynamics and see where patterns might be, who is like what, and who is really replicating some of the behavioral patterns in the family in terms of dealing with conflict and issues and seeing how that have affected us as individual through the generations and playing out not just in a family life but in all sorts of settings. And when it comes to work, or even when we try to think about um, tackling injustices, all the family issues might play it back out in how we engage with the world. So my question to you is, what were your thoughts about thinking about drawing out a genogram?
I remember when I interviewed you on a cross culture podcast, you already mentioned genogram. And so I thought, oh, okay, that's a cool thing. I'll do that in the future. And then I think I looked online on how to do it, and it seemed like really complicated, and I just forgot about it. But actually, hearing you talk about genogram again and actually seeing your genogram last session, it made me think actually it is not too much of a huge task, and it would be quite interesting to try and do one. I'm aware that there's a lot of information I don't know at all. Yeah, I don't know names of relatives. I don't even know if my mum and dad know names of like one generation above them, birth dates and that kind of thing. I completely don't know anything at all. It seems like quite a intimate experience, I would say, because not only do you chart people, maybe their age, I mean their birth date, death date, marriage and things, but you actually write down what kind of relationships they have with other people, and even things like affairs or divorce and that kind of thing. So it seems like quite an intimate experience. Like I would only want to share it with people I'm close to, or I guess in the group. Yeah, I do look forward to doing it. It sometimes feels like a huge task, and other times it seems like it's manageable, and it might be quite nice. I'll tell you something. Like my dad, he talks a lot, and most of the time, I don't listen. There's something called Hey, long breath. Like he might go on and on about something, which is annoying. So then I just like don't listen. But because sometimes I don't listen, I miss some things that he might share about his past and about what Hong Kong was like when he was there, what the village was like. And actually doing this kind of task, I could sit down with him and ask him questions,
Mm.
which would be good. I need to brace myself for listening to his stories, but actually it might be something nice for our relationship, I think, to be actually interested in his story and what happens in his generations that come before him.
That is so important. I mean, and when I think about when, whether it is in our Christian community or even in normal BC society community out there, when people talk about mental health challenges, efficacy, fighting stigma, anti-racism,
Mm.
people always like have this kind of fight with other people, and isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I throw something at you and you throw something at me, and they're not really listening. But what you mentioned here
Mm.
is really important because even listening, even the family story, where do we learn to able to be super angry and anxious? Yeah, is in our family. Where do we learn, can really learn to be listening to people in spite of whatever going on? It'll be in our family. So as you think about your family dynamic and genogram, the ability to listen to stories that you may or may not like or agree with or confuse or stir up many emotion and able to
Yeah.
learn to regulate and hold it and listen, understand is such a vital learning thing, not for just for yourself, but for everybody around you. And that kind of work can really translate to other work that we will do because we grow in learning in our family.
I think even the process itself is something that is interesting anyway. I don't know if you've heard of cultural thought patterns, the way that different cultures think or speak or express themselves.
Hmm.
And there's one which is like the Asian way, and I think it's like a spiral kind of circle where, and this is the way my dad talks, or if he if he tells a story, it like you never know what the point of the story is. It's like goes around in circles, and or when he's explaining something, oh, this thing which is like this thing which is like this thing, whereas sometimes I like to think more like direct way. So I think even in the process of finding out stories and things for the genogram, it's a it would be an interesting experience.
Wow. I'm so excited. I'm so psyched to really think, get to find time to know your story, get time to hear it um, in times to come. Now, time coming to an end soon. I want to ask you when the last question is compared to other kind of what I call global majority groups in the UK. Yeah, I don't like to call it.
Nice.
Um, I don't
Global
like to call it
majority.
BAME or
Oh,
minority ethnic, isn't it? So we're
ethnic
not
minority.
minority. We're not. We're majority. That we might be culturally not dominant for other reasons, but we're the global majority people. So compared to
Amazing.
other groups out there, the BC groups are relatively small. Yeah. So I'm Chinese. You're Chinese. So BC includes like other ethnic groups like Korean, Japanese, Filipino, Cambodian, Vietnamese. But we're very small
Mm.
and the presence and the voice of the BC Christian art can be even smaller because we're the intersection is even less, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're more hidden. What encouragement would you give to our listeners and other BC people out there?
Well, encouragement. Oh, wow. Okay. I would say, I think I liked when you said about intersection. So the intersection of being BC and Christian makes it, there's even less of us, but actually not to despise that,
Hmm.
not to despise being small in number or that there's less of us. And actually, this is almost like a pivotal moment. We're starting this kind of group. People are learning, oh, what does it mean to be BC and Christian? And actually, how can we pave the way for future generations? So, not to despise that we're small in number, but actually press on to what we are as this kind of people in this intersection and pave the way for future generations. So, that's really like praying into it. That's really talking to other people about it and building relationships with other people who are also in these kind of spaces.
Wow, that is so profound, isn't it? So don't let our smallness or perceived smallness limit us and make us become voiceless or hidden.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It should have the opposite effect. Well,
exactly.
that would be nice.
Someone told me this story about being a mosquito. It's like being a mosquito. Because what is the most
Oh,
annoying animal out
mosquito.
there ever?
Oh,
Yeah, not the elephant. Yeah, you don't need to be big and kind of stomping around. No, be like the mosquito because it's like tiny,
oh.
but and the impact is massive. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Wow. Be
yeah,
mosquitoes, everyone.
yeah, it's a good connection with being Asian because mosquitoes everywhere.
Yeah, no, I was
Right,
completely.
next session in our growth group, it's about what is your Asian heritage, and I believe you are facilitating
Oh,
that one, isn't it?
yes,
Can you
I
tell
am.
us,
Yes.
give me a bit of teaser to what is it about?
So, what is your Asian heritage? It's about us exploring actually when we might have had a awakening to our difference. And this is more probably more useful for people who have grown up in the UK or in America or in a Western majority culture space rather than Malaysia and Singapore, for example. Yeah, so it's exploration about when you noticed you were culturally different or when you noticed you were a different ethnicity or race to other people around you, and being able to just share those stories with one another and just to maybe not see if there's any correlation, but actually to help people think, actually, this is when I had this racial awakening or I became race conscious.
Wow, it's like Matrix.
Oh, I don't know Matrix.
Oh man,
I
okay,
forgot.
I need to
I
cut this
watched it
out.
a long time ago.
Anyhow, awakening. Yeah, so some may feel proud of the heritage, some may feel shame or embarrassment about the heritage, and but this is about feeling, recognizing, acknowledging, affirming, validating that heritage, and what can we do with it? Yeah. So join us on our next episode, and we talk about what is your Asian heritage. So thank you, Jessie, for joining us.
Thank you, Wayne. It's been a pleasure.
Indeed.